I'm not completely sure how close I came to something really bad happening that day, but thinking back on it now, I'm pretty sure someone almost got into my house. And the worst part is, I still don't know if it was just one person. Or two. This happened a couple years ago. My family lives in a 3-story house and we're all pretty used to being up late. It's normal for lights to still be on around 2 or 3 in the morning. One night, around 3 a.m., my Uncle Alex stepped outside to throw away the trash. It was routine. But when he came back inside, he told us something that stuck with me. He said the second he stepped outside, he got this really strong feeling that someone was watching him. Our driveway was dark, except for the outline of my mom's van parked near the garage. Alex said when he looked toward it, he could have sworn someone was sitting inside. The windows were tinted so he couldn't make out a face, just the shape of someone in the driver's seat. He stood there for a moment trying to focus his eyes, but the longer he looked, the harder it was to tell if someone was actually there. Eventually he brushed it off and came back inside. But that wasn't the only weird thing. Around that same time, my mom started noticing strange stuff with her car. Random items would move. Things would disappear. One day she even found a beer bottle sitting inside the passenger seat. None of us drank that kind of beer. And none of us had any idea how it got there. Up until then, she had always left the car unlocked. After that, she started locking it every night. My room is on the 3rd floor of the house, and my window faces the front yard. After those things started happening, I began noticing noises late at night. Footsteps, light ones, and sometimes this faint clicking sound. Our front porch has cement stairs leading up to it, and a couple of the steps are loose. Whenever someone steps on them, they make a really specific sound. You can't mistake it. At first I assumed it was my other uncle Mario. He's younger and goes out partying almost every night. He'd come home at random hours. But the footsteps I heard didn't sound like someone casually walking up the stairs. They were slower, more careful, almost like someone was trying not to be heard. That's when it started creeping me out. One night, I had just watched a horror movie and didn't want to sleep alone, so I made a little spot on the floor in my grandma's room. She keeps a security monitor next to her bed that shows the driveway camera. While I was trying to fall asleep, I glanced at the monitor, and that's when I saw him. A tall man standing near the edge of the camera frame. He wasn't moving, just standing there, completely still. At first I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, so I blinked a few times, but he was still there, just standing in the dark, barely inside the camera's view. I grabbed my phone and sent a message in our family group chat asking if anyone had just gotten home. Everyone responded. My mom said she was already in bed. My Uncle Mario said he was still out. Everyone else was inside the house. No one had been outside. I slowly looked back at the monitor. The man was gone. Just like that. Nothing else happened after that for a while. But about a month later, something happened that I'll never forget. I stayed home from school that day. Everyone else in my family had work or classes, so I was the only one in the house. It was around 2 in the afternoon. I was laying in bed scrolling on TikTok when I suddenly heard a man's voice outside, and the faint humming sound of a small engine. I looked out my window toward the driveway. There was a golf cart parked outside. Next to it stood a man wearing a blue shirt. He didn't look immediately threatening, but something about him felt wrong. None of our cars were in the driveway, and nobody had told me anyone was coming over. I called my mom first, but she works at a hospital and didn't answer. So I called my stepdad. When I told him there was a man in our driveway, his tone changed instantly. He asked me if I recognized him. I said no. He told me to keep watching and call him if anything changed. A few minutes later, my mom called back. I explained what I was seeing. Without hesitation, she said, "Call the cops." So I did. The dispatcher answered and told me to hide somewhere safe. But before I could, I suddenly had this awful thought. I wasn't sure if anyone had locked the doors before leaving that morning. I ran downstairs. The front door was locked. But when I reached the back door, it was wide open. My stomach dropped. I slammed it shut and locked it as fast as I could. And almost immediately, the doorknob started rattling. Hard. Someone was trying to open it. I turned toward the door, and that's when I saw him. It wasn't the man in the blue shirt. This guy was shirtless, tall, really skinny, and there was something seriously off about him. He was violently pulling the handle, like he had just missed getting inside. Like he knew I had just locked it. I didn't wait another second. I ran upstairs, locked myself in my parents' bedroom, and stayed on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. I was shaking so bad I could barely talk. Every second waiting for the police felt like 10 minutes. Eventually, I heard sirens. The police searched the entire house, the yard, the street, but there was no one there. No man in the blue shirt, no shirtless guy, nothing. They checked the security footage, but it didn't show anything clear. The man in the driveway had stayed right at the edge of the camera, and the back area was too dark to make anything out. Just movement in the shadows. Almost like whoever they were knew exactly where the cameras couldn't see them. To this day, I still don't know what actually happened. Were there two people working together? Was one watching the house while the other tried to get inside? Or was it just some terrifying coincidence? Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I didn't run downstairs when I did, if I hadn't locked that back door. And the creepiest part is, a few weeks ago I went back to visit the neighborhood. While I was driving down the street, I heard the same quiet hum of a golf cart. I looked down the road, and there was one parked near the corner. Same shape, same sound. I didn't stick around long enough to see who was driving it. When I was 17, my parents left me home alone for 2 weeks while they went on vacation. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. It actually happened pretty often. My parents traveled a lot, and I would stay home to take care of our 4 dogs and keep an eye on the house and garden. Normally, I felt pretty safe. Our neighborhood was relatively new, surrounded almost entirely by forest. Most of our neighbors were friends of my dad from the military, which gave the whole place this weird sense of security. It felt like the last place anyone would try to break into. But that summer, something felt off. A couple of houses on our street had already been broken into. Even knowing that, my parents still left for the trip, reassuring me that everything would be fine. We had 4 big dogs, and the entire property was surrounded by a tall metal fence with spikes along the top. Jumping it would almost definitely leave someone injured. The first couple days were completely normal. Sometimes at night, I'd hear small thuds coming from the garden, but that wasn't unusual. Martins were always running through my mom's flower beds, knocking things over. It happened so often that even the dogs stopped reacting to it. Then, 2 days later, I had to go to the store. I ended up leaving later than I planned, and by the time I started walking back home, it was already getting dark. The path I usually took went through a stretch that was kind of like a mix between a park and a forest. In the evenings, it was usually busy with people walking their dogs, so I didn't think much of it. I was halfway through the path, texting someone on my phone when I passed a man sitting on a bench. I barely noticed him, but after I walked past, I heard the sound of someone standing up. Footsteps. I glanced back for a second and saw the same guy walking in my direction. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed he probably lived somewhere in the neighborhood too. When I exited the forest path and reached the road where the houses started, he was still behind me, still walking at the same pace. My house was at the very end of the road. One by one, I passed every house on that street, and he kept following. By the time I reached the final intersection where my house was, I knew for a fact he didn't live here. My stomach dropped. Luckily, my neighbor who lived right next to us was outside watering his plants. When he saw me walking past, he called out to me and started making small talk. I must have looked pretty stressed because he immediately asked if I was okay. The second the guy behind me saw that I stopped to talk to someone, he turned around and started running back toward the forest. That's when it hit me. He had been following me home. They told me the neighborhood was safe, that I had the dogs, and that I shouldn't worry. So I tried to calm myself down and forget about it. That night, I did what I usually did when my parents were gone. Instead of sleeping upstairs, I slept in their room on the ground floor. I didn't like the idea of the dogs walking up and down the stairs in the dark and possibly hurting themselves. Around midnight, I was laying in bed reading a book. All 4 dogs were sleeping on the bed with me. Then I heard a thud. It came from a window in the room next to the bedroom. At first I assumed it was just another animal outside, the same way it had been the previous nights. But this time, the dogs woke up. They started growling. A few seconds passed in silence. Then another thud. This time it came from the window inside the bedroom. That's when my heart started racing. The dogs jumped off the bed and ran toward the window. Then it happened, but louder. then another, and another. Whoever was outside had started hitting every window on the ground floor of the house. The dogs completely lost it, barking and running from window to window wherever the sound came from. I was already crying at this point because I knew exactly what was happening. Someone was outside of my house. I left the bedroom and slowly walked into the center of the house. Our house had a very open layout, which meant I could see the front door from the middle of the room. And the front door had a small window in it. So I turned off all the lights and sat down in the darkness a few feet away from the door, just waiting, hoping whoever it was would get scared away by the dogs. But they didn't. The dog suddenly rushed toward the front door, barking like crazy. And then I saw it, a black silhouette outside the glass. A man leaning forward and looking inside my house. Before I could even process it, he started slamming his fist against the window in the door. I immediately crawled under the table and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called my dad. No answer. It was around 2 a.m. and they were on vacation. I called again. Still nothing. On the third attempt, my mom answered. She sounded confused, asked why I was calling so late. All I managed to say was, someone is trying to break into the house. While I was on the phone, the man outside started throwing his entire body against the door, trying to force it open. My mom could hear everything through the phone. The banging, the dogs barking, me struggling to breathe. My dad immediately started calling everyone he could think of. My uncle, my neighbors, my grandma, anyone who could get to the house quickly. The first person to arrive was the same neighbor who talked to me earlier that day. The moment he came outside and shouted, the man at the door ran toward the back garden. But I was still too scared to open the door. Even though I could see my neighbor standing there, I knew the man was still somewhere on my property. The back garden was completely dark. My neighbor didn't want to go back there alone in case the guy attacked him. About 10 minutes later, my uncle, aunt, and grandma pulled into the driveway. My uncle had a key, so he unlocked the door. The second the door opened, my dogs bolted outside. They were hunting dogs, not exactly friendly to strangers. My uncle and the neighbor grabbed flashlights and went into the backyard with the dogs to search the area. Meanwhile, I was still sitting in the chair, shaking and crying, while my mom stayed on the phone trying to understand what had just happened. Eventually, they discovered that the man had jumped into another neighbor's yard and escaped, but he had definitely tried to break into the house. The small window on the front door was cracked. The door frame itself was loosened from him slamming into it. And to this day, I still think about what could have happened if the neighbor hadn't come outside when he did. I moved into an old house about 3 weeks ago. For the first couple weeks, everything was normal. Then one night, I had a nightmare about something standing in my hallway. I woke up around 4 in the morning. And about 20 minutes later, I heard someone tapping on the glass door to my backyard. The weird part is, nobody was there. And the next morning, I realized someone, or something, had actually been outside my window. The house itself was built sometime in the 1940s. It's the kind of place that constantly makes noise at night. Old wood creaking, pipes knocking in the walls, random little sounds that happen when a house is so old. Normally that stuff doesn't bother me. For the first 2 weeks living there, I actually wasn't alone. 2 of my friends had just moved to the city and were staying with me temporarily while they searched for an apartment. It honestly made the house feel less empty. Eventually though, during the second week, they finally found a place and moved out. They packed everything up and left while I was at work that day. Before they left, I specifically asked one of them, who had the front door key, to leave it on the kitchen table so I could grab it when I got home. But when I walked into the house that night, the key wasn't there. They had forgotten to leave it. It wasn't a huge problem though. I could still get in and out of the house through the sliding glass door in the backyard, so it wasn't urgent. My friend apologized and told me she'd bring the key the next day. So the next night I decided just to relax. It was technically my first night completely alone in the house, so I threw on a couple movies and just stayed up watching TV. At some point I texted my friend asking if she was still coming by with the key. She told me she couldn't make it that night because her boyfriend had the car and was stuck working late, but she said she dropped the key off early in the morning before work. She worked at a coffee shop down the street and had to be there around 5 a.m. Eventually I finished the last movie I was watching and went to bed. That's when I had the nightmare. In the dream, I was lying in bed with a friend. The room was really dark. There was just enough light coming from somewhere that I could still see down the hallway outside my bedroom. Then I heard something strange. It sounded like clothes falling on the floor. That soft thud when a pile of clothes drops. I sat up and looked down the hallway toward the bathroom. And there was a pile of clothes sitting in front of the bathroom door. I remember feeling confused about how they got there. Then the friend next to me quietly said, "I'm scared." I remember responding with the exact same thing. We decided we should get up and move somewhere else in the house. But as I stood up, I looked down the hallway again. and something slowly peeked around the corner. It was this tall, shadowy figure, completely bald, and for some reason my brain assumed it was wearing a suit. But what really scared me was the way it moved. It wasn't smooth or natural. Its body jerked violently, almost like it was glitching. It kept twitching and snapping back and forth as it leaned out from the closet doorway. I started yelling at it, "Get out, leave, you don't belong here." But the more I yelled at it, the more violently it jerked around. It almost looked like it was stuck halfway inside the closet. Then, for some reason, I ran straight at it. Right as I reached the closet, the figure snapped back inside. I immediately flipped the light switch. The closet was completely empty. And that's when I woke up. My heart was pounding. I didn't even want to open my eyes. I had that weird feeling that if I looked beside my bed, something might actually be standing there. Eventually, I grabbed my phone to check the time. It was around 4:10 in the morning. The house was completely silent. Too silent. So I turned the TV on just to have some noise in the room. After about 20 minutes, I started getting tired again. So I turned the TV off and tried to fall asleep. Maybe 10 minutes passed. Then I heard knocking. It came from somewhere in the house. And I know I didn't imagine it. Because my cat, who usually sleeps on my bed, suddenly perked up. She stared straight at my bedroom door. Then she jumped off the bed and walked out of the room like she was going to investigate. At the time, I assumed it was my friend stopping by with the key. It was almost 5 a.m. anyway. So eventually I fell asleep again. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the mailbox to see if the key was there. It wasn't. So I drove to the coffee shop where my friend worked. They told me she hadn't come in that day. I tried calling her, it went straight to voicemail. A few minutes later, she texted me saying she woke up around 6 a.m. feeling sick and called off work. She told me I could just stop by her apartment later to get the key. That's when something started bothering me. If she never came by, then who was the one knocking on my house at 4:30 in the morning? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something. It didn't actually sound like knocking, it sounded more like tapping on glass. The sliding door I had been using is in the kitchen, and that door leads directly into my fenced backyard, meaning someone would have had to be standing in my backyard to tap it. 4:30 in the morning. I tried not to think about it too much, until later that day when I went into the kitchen to water my plants. They sit on the counter right below 3 small windows. I pulled open the blinds to let the sunlight in, and what I saw outside the window made my stomach drop. Right in the dirt below the window was writing, large letters scratched into the ground, facing directly towards the house. And I swear on my life, that message was not there the day before, which means someone had been standing outside my kitchen window that morning, right where I was sleeping. And judging by the way the dirt looked, they'd been there for a while.